How does AI actually impact jobs? Maybe your job, maybe your business. Will companies hire less people? Will it be today, next month, next year, next decade? What will our economy and the economies around the world look like? In today's episode, we deep dive into all these questions. Let's accelerate your business. Hi everyone, welcome to the AI Accelerator Business Show, where your business gets the latest strategies, information, and tactics to get the benefits from artificial intelligence. So my name is Carl Ye, and I'm joined by my co-host Jeff Bradshaw. And in today's show, we talk about the impact of AI on jobs and what it means for your business.
Carl, happy to be here. This is our first show, so excited to be talking about a big topic that matters to everybody, and that's just jobs. And one of the things we wanted to cover off the top is just why it matters and why you should be interested in this. And I think for me, my opinion is that the whole jobs discussion around AI is a bit of the elephant in the room. I think for many business executives, it's something that they don't totally understand and don't necessarily want to talk about. But the fact of the matter is AI is going to change the way that our businesses operate. And I think that it matters to anyone who has another 10 to 20 plus years of work left. I think if you're close to retirement, maybe not such a big deal. But I think if you're leading a company, I think if you're a parent that has young kids that are thinking about going to university, or you're a young person trying to figure out your career path, I think taking a look at the impact AI will have on jobs is something that's important for everybody. But I don't know, what are your thoughts, Carl?
So I think we're looking at a timeline, more so that if people think that you'll be replaced today, I don't think that's the case. Now, there's some extreme use cases, something like Klarna saying that they've let go of this many people because they have an AI that can do customer service. You've also got some news stories about some pretty big tech firms, maybe Cisco, even Microsoft. Now, what I don't know is if those, let's say, layoffs are actually related to AI. Because for example, we're here in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada, and we even got an article, I think last week, where it says, oh, we've got issues with our job market and AI is taking over. But it's funny because there's one sentence about AI is replacing jobs, but there is no credible evidence to back it up. It was just a statement. So I don't know if the reporter or the paper wanted to actually just jump on the bandwagon and say something without having anything to back that up. And so back to my point, where I don't think you'll be replaced today, but I think it's important to learn, understand, because if you can actually see what are the benefits and the change, not the benefits, but more so what are the changes coming, I think that's where you have to really understand where things are going and where the changes are happening. Maybe similar to when the printing press came out, when the computers came out, no one really knew what was happening, but it was important to learn because there is a shift in what potentially new jobs are coming versus what may be redundant and may be replaced.
And that's an interesting point. I mean, I think that's for me. I'm a little bit older than you, and I think back to the late 80s. And I was coming out of high school, and there were a lot of guys who I refer to as the geeks. I'm now in that category of geeks, that were all excited about computer programming. It was all this DOS programming. It was a bunch of text on a black screen, and guys were really excited about it, and I didn't get it. A few years later, all of a sudden, Windows comes out, and Windows 95, and all of a sudden it gets easier to use and understand. And all of a sudden, people like me were going, "Oh wow, I didn't get the early side." Same thing as the internet. I remember I worked at CTV in the 90s, and a guy I worked with was talking about these chat rooms and message boards and everything. And I was kind of going, that just seems useless to me. But that was the early stages of the internet. Advance it 5-10 years later. Same thing as streaming media. Streaming media came out in the early days of streaming media. It was confusing and difficult. And all of a sudden now, I mean, how do we live without all of the streaming feeds that we have here? So I think that's where AI is right now. It's still in its infancy. And I think that a lot of people don't understand just what it is or the impacts or what does it mean for jobs. And so when people get confused or a bit, they don't understand, they tend to put their heads in the sand. And I just think and you can speak more to this as well, because AI is moving so quickly, I don't think people have as much time to stick their head in the sands. as they did years ago. But I mean,
so one thing I wanted to build on your comment, and I really wanted to share, is this 5 levels of um, stages of artificial intelligence that OpenAI came, I guess it was leaked or whatever through Bloomberg or the information. And it's 5 levels. For those who are listening on the podcast, I'll link out to the image, but it's essentially level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. There's 5 levels. First level is chatbots, AI with conversational language, where that's where most things are. I would say everybody knows about it. ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Llama. Most people though through ChatGPT only, but there's also Bing. Some of you may know Perplexity, but AI with conversational language. Now, level 2, which is it's called reasoners. So it's human level problem solving at the PhD level. Now, at the time of this recording, OpenAI actually just launched O1 and O1 Mini, their new models, which they mention, and it's been tested quite, there's a lot of benchmarks to it, that it is PhD level reasoning. And so that's still being rolled out. It's still in preview, so we don't get the full model, but it seems like that's where we are. And over the next couple months, these other companies will be releasing similar things. I would imagine Anthropic will be releasing Opus 3.5. They have Sonnet 3.5, so 3.54, Grok, Llama, Gemini. So most likely we'll all be in that space. And I think that's pretty big for businesses to understand. It's like you now have a PhD level reasoning system model AI in your pocket for $20 a month, or some even for free for a limited number of uses per day. I think like that's a pretty significant aspect. Now we're going to have another show on O1. So just let me finish through level 3's agents. So that's systems that can take action for days. Level 4 is innovators. AI that can aid invention and actually invent itself. And then 5 is organizations, which AI can do the work of an organization. And when we talk about years of this, we're not talking decades out. We're talking the goal of some of these companies. And for example, Sam Altman thought this through, like he had in several podcasts. We're talking the next 5, 7, 9 years, and that goes by pretty quickly to see what these levels are, what the capabilities of AI is.
I was gonna mention to you though, it's interesting because you mentioned Grok and Perplexity and Bing and all of these things, and those are the kinds of things that I think confuse a lot of people and scare a lot of people because those are foreign terms. Like not everybody knows who Sam Altman is, and I think that's the interesting thing about this is that it gets so complex. I go back to the comment about the days of DOS, and and I think, but based on that, I think everything you're talking about, if people take the time to learn a little bit about AI, it doesn't become so foreign. And I think everything you're talking about makes total sense. And I think that's the gap between this discussion around the job market is people go, nah, it's not affecting me today, so I'm not going to pay attention to it. I don't get it. It's confusing, so I don't want to talk about it. But that's part of the problem, is that I think that it is happening so quickly that I think if people just invest a little bit of time and energy into learning a bit more about AI, they might be able to see where the opportunities are to adapt their career direction or their current job to be able to use AI as a tool to enhance what they do as opposed to being fearful of it.
So I wanted to get into, so if employees are listening to this and they do have that fear, what are some, let's say, what are some use cases? First of all, I would think, what are some use cases today that would benefit them? First of all, because I think maybe some of that fear is I don't know what it can and can't do. So I wanted to kind of relay some of that information. So for example, I think today, reliably, AI can do anywhere between there's usually that 10 to 40% that it can improve your productivity, increase efficiency, and reduce all that repetitive and mundane work. So if you do something that is repetitive daily, if you do something that is data driven or predictive, then it's an opportunity for you to get that off your plate so you're not doing those things. And you know, for any job, there's always those pieces that are kind of you have to do, you have to do it regularly. It's boring, but it's part of the job. But if you can offload all those things that you don't want to do to AI and leaves you more time to do what you want to do, I think that's where the 10 to 40% productivity gain comes into, whether it's, you know, using just ChatGPT or using a whole set of other tools, things like Zapier, Make, Respell, all those other automation tools. There's a lot of things that you could do to help you get, I would say, even the enjoyment from your job rather than crap, I have to do 4 hours of this repetitive fill-in work and I don't want to do it and I do it every week.
So I mean, that could be something like somebody does a weekly report or a monthly report on some kind of data or information they have. Well, that's where an AI tool could help them create that report quicker. Or if somebody's writing proposals for clients, they could rely on AI to help write a proposal. Or people are working on creative initiatives, like if you're creating a creative brief for a campaign, you could use it. I mean, and I think that's, you're right. I think a lot of people don't understand how it can be used, and therefore they might resist it. And so I think you're right. And that's why I'm saying is that if people just invest a little bit of time, it can pay off. And I mentioned earlier, like, why it matters. I've got three kids, 18, 22, and 23. They're now going into the job market. My son has a business degree. My daughter's a teacher. My youngest isn't sure what she wants to do yet. But I mean, when you think about career paths, and this could be somebody who's 30, 40 years old, you got to think about how this technology is going to impact that. Because my daughter being a teacher, she needs to learn, in my opinion, needs to learn about AI, because I think she will have some kind of an AI assistant, or AI will play a significant role in the education system in the future. My son's in business. Any business he goes into, whether he goes into sales or entrepreneurship or anything else, AI is going to be there. And I think, and again, it's that comment, right? It's not AI that's going to replace your job. It's people without AI knowledge are going to be replaced with people that do have AI knowledge, right? Is that correct?
Um, you know, that thinking to me has evolved over time where it isn't just anybody with AI that can replace anybody else, right? So, and I'm basing it on what the current AI models and systems we have today. So if you were just you and me and we, used all the systems to our advantage, we would not replace, let's say, a lawyer. Even though, we can ask, Sonnet, Claude, Llama, any of these tools, create me whatever documents, think through this stuff, because we don't have any grounded education or background in depth in the law. A lawyer would get way better outputs and recognize any of the hallucinations, any things that are off, and would be able to ask better questions, spot better things, and get in more in depth into that. But I would say a lawyer or a doctor who uses AI will be that much better than someone in the same profession who doesn't. So take your kids, for example, teachers, a business owner. So if they were to leverage the full capabilities of an AI advisor, build their own co-pilots for themselves, it would just be a lot more beneficial than someone who doesn't. And that's why I think the saying, someone who uses AI will replace someone who doesn't. I think there's a little bit of nuances. The person in the industry who's an expert who uses AI will be that much further off than somebody who in the same role in the same industry who doesn't.
So my question with that, again, and a lot of this stuff people have to understand, is that nobody knows what the future holds and where AI is going to take us. Nobody does. I don't think, there's people that have more experience, but I think that when it comes to that, so my question there, and just use lawyers as an example, if there's, let's say, 100,000 lawyers in the country, with AI, do we still need 100,000 lawyers, or do we only need 50,000 lawyers?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think, for our business, whenever we talk with any of those presidents or CEOs, and once we do a full explanation of what we talked about, jokingly or half serious, but I believe they're serious inside, is, hey, do we need 7 accountants or do we only need 4? Do we need 5 HR people or do we only need 3? Like, do we need 10 marketers or do we only need 5? And that's what I think the nuances of, hey, this is going to impact the economy. Yeah, it's not going to be hordes of unemployment in over 2 weeks or 2 months. It's, oh, we probably won't replace these 3 people when they retire, or we won't need to hire 4 people. Or, for example, if you're starting a new business, do you need to have, coming from a B2B SaaS background, originally you need like you get all this VC money to hire people to, go to market, operations, software engineering. Well, like, do you need that many people when the level of AI right now is at the PhD level reasoning? And then once we have agents, how many people do you need for those roles in building a business and then translate that to an enterprise or medium-sized business?
Well, and I think something that's important that we probably maybe should have stated off the top, because I think you and I are on the same page, is that we are not encouraging AI to replace jobs. That is not good for society. That is not good for mankind. I think that the reason we're talking about it is that it has the potential of doing that. So I think we're in a situation to go, how do we address that as mankind, and how do we address that from a societal standpoint so that we do have employment for people and we are finding ways to replace people? I take a look, I'm going like, do we need as many teachers? I think teachers is one area where we're still going to need people. I still think we're going to need medical professionals, but do we need as many? But when I take a look at things, and this is just realistic, is that I got friends who are real estate agents. Do we really need as many real estate agents as we have? Do we need investment advisors? Do we need as many lawyers? Do we need as many psychologists? Because there's so many AI tools that are out there that can replace what these people do, even programmers. I mean, it used to be 10 years ago, it's like, oh, become a programmer. There's no shortage of work. Well, now we're seeing AI being able to program. So
Yeah.
I guess that's one of the things I just want to say, is that we're not saying, hey, get rid of people and use AI as a replacement. We're trying to say, let's together figure this out and figure out how we're going to address this new world we're going into.
Well, there is an article that I wanted to point into was it's called the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and it says that, AI will affect, and this was released January 14th, 2024. AI will affect almost 40% of jobs around the world, replacing some and complementing others. So, and the article was saying we need a careful balance of policies to tap into that potential. And I think that's where, the convergence of this, to how fast the technology is going, as well as what are the, maybe not just regulations, but what are the policies that will either encourage or enhance or augment that? Because all we're hearing in the news now is, the EU has this act, this has this act, but it's like, okay, but what are the policies to help people not just learn, but encourage the technology, right? Because I think there was a rumor going around or comment going around that Sam Altman was looking for $7 trillion, and I think in a couple podcasts he said, I never really said 7 trillion. I don't know where that number came from, but we know the compute costs are going to be significantly higher just to build more and more. If the scaling laws of, hey, more compute, more GPUs means better models, I think that's where the race is going. So where the money is supposed to come from? And I think a really good point I heard from another podcast, the AI Institute, the Marketing AI Institute, in their artificial intelligence podcast. I think Paul Reitzer there, the host there, said that, hey, remember the space race when, I wasn't even born then, but I remember all the pictures and there's a race to get to space. I guess it was during the Cold War, they were competing with Russia. But there's a lot of money that the government put in, and everyone had a common goal. I don't think that's today. There's some thought that's like, hey, we actually need infrastructure. We need learning to help people in the economy adapt, learn new skills, and then empower it rather than try to restrict it.
Well, I think that's the interesting thing, is a lot of people too. People can't, in my opinion, from what I've seen, people can't imagine what the future will look like. They always base it on what they know. So they look historically and they look backwards, and they're saying, well, the same thing is going to repeat. And I think a lot of people are going, well, when we take a look at other industries, jobs have been replaced with new jobs. Computers did this, and now people are programmers. And I'm just worried that necessarily won't happen here. So what do you do with that, right? Like, I think it's, I think, I go back to the writer's strike, and I come from the video world. I worked in the video space for 30 years, and, you get all these creatives, and they're like, well, we're going to strike. And I think the strike is like, well, you might be able to slow it down, but you're not going to stop the process. The train has left the station. And I think rather than all of these writers fighting, and it's writers, it's voiceover artists, it's photographers, videographers, I'm going, there's new technology coming out, and I'm going, rather than going, oh no, we're still going to be needed. And again, to me, putting your head in the sand, it's a matter of learn the new technology and figure out where you fit, as opposed to fighting it because you don't like the outcome. I mean, I take a look at voiceover artists. I mean, in the video world, we used to pay very valuable voiceover artists, and they have incredible skill and they bring incredible value. But the fact of the matter is that if a video production company can get the same voiceover or similar voiceover for a fraction of the cost with more flexibility, quicker, they're going to eventually do it. And I compare this all the time. You always get these campaigns of people talking about, shop local, and people are very on board with shop local, but they're saying shop local while they're hitting send on their order to Amazon. And I think that yes, I believe that we need to keep people employed, but I think that there's going to be these new technologies that might replace it. And so it's a matter of how do we adjust? How do employers figure out ways to keep people employed? Because again, as we know too, there's big repercussions if we don't. If there's 40% layoff, 40% fewer jobs in the next 5 to 10 years, 20 years, there's a huge impact to society.
And maybe like the article said, it's 40% impact, so not necessarily 40% layoff. So, and I wanted to, wrap this show a little bit to a tool that you could actually check to see if your job will be impacted. And it's a tool developed by smarterx.ai. And I wanted to show, so what it does is, so we talked about lawyers, right? So let's go, it's a custom GPT. So if you are on ChatGPT, you can actually access it, whether you're paid or on a paid account or not. And we'll put the link in the description below. But if I type in something like lawyer, how about corporate lawyer? For those listening to on the podcast, I'll have the link, but what this GPT does is, what are the impacts for the task specific with that profession? It's not 100% perfect, but it can show you what exactly the level of exposure, even the time saved at some of the tasks that this profession does. And so I'd recommend you to put your job in to see the impacts. So for this corporate lawyer, we have contracting and drafting, 30 to 50% time saved, which is interesting. Legal research, compliance monitoring, litigation support. It does a pretty, good overview of what a corporate lawyer could potentially or does, and then the impact to it. And then it has a little legend here of what kind of exposure to AI, everything from E1, direct exposure, to E10, exposure given physical world action abilities to humanoid robots. So it gives you a nice outline of what potentially it could do and the exposure given. So I definitely recommend you check this out. So Jeff, what is one thing that businesses should take away when we talk about AI and jobs?
I believe that it's just about time to learn, educate yourself, and get into the world of AI so that you have a better understanding of what it's all about, both the good and the bad, so that you're better prepared to make a decision that is right for you and for your operations.
Learn more about AI and jobs by watching these videos. If you like today's episode and want to keep learning how AI can impact your business, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next episode.